So good morning, everyone. My name is Yanez. I am Senior Vice President for Community Engagement and Strategic Partnerships here at Helios, and I'm going to be moderating our panel this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to come up and take a seat. And as they do that, one, make sure your mics are on. Two, Ray at the beginning mentioned that we'll have time for questions, so we're going to chat with our panel for about 30 minutes about the visualization, about attainment, about how this tool can hopefully help inform all of our work. And hopefully at the end we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So if you do have questions, please write them down. We'll have people in the room going around picking them up, and we'll get through as many of those questions as possible. Like I said, I already have a few questions just based on Luke's presentation. So to our panelists, good morning. And thank you for being here. Morning. We're incredibly lucky to have a panel of just truly amazing and dedicated leaders in Arizona in this space. So I'm going to do introductions really quickly here. To my left here is someone that I think most of us know, Erin Hart. Erin is the Director of the Office of Strategic Initiatives and Policy Advisor on Higher Education and Early Education to Governor Katie Hobbs. Erin, thank you for being here. Next, we have Dr. Richard Daniel, President of South Mountain Community College. Richard, thank you. And of course, we heard from Luke Tate, Managing Director of the Office of Applied Innovation at Arizona State University. Thank you, Luke. So I'd like to start the conversation, Erin, with you. Luke finished on a very strong note around educational attainment, and I really want to ground this conversation in educational attainment and how that impacts our economy and our workforce. So for you, I want to put up a slide just as a reminder of the conversation or the presentation Luke just walked us through that looks at how individuals with different levels of attainment present themselves, in this case, in the manufacturing sector. And Erin, you've been a champion for educational attainment, not just in the governor's office, but in a number of previous roles, a champion of the attainment goal. As you look at these data, as you look at these graphics, I'd just like to get your reaction.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. It's so good to see all of you today, and hello to friends, and it's great to meet the new friends in the room. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I just wanted to first thank the Helios Education Foundation and ASU for your work and your foresight, really, in thinking about this model and bringing it together, because data like this can serve as a great catalyst for conversation and can help us really start to think about, well, why does that data look like that, and what does that tell us? So it can really help spark conversations that can lead to meaningful impact. So thank you. So reacting to your question about this chart, for me, I think there are a few things you can take away, but the big thing I wanted to hone in on is that the future strength of our economy is directly tied to the education and training that Arizonans will have beyond high school. So as you can see here in the chart, the more education and training that people have, the higher their wages are going to be, and the less likely their jobs might be at risk for automation. We've seen some other recent data, too, that complements this and backs it up from Georgetown that shows that 7 out of 10 of Arizona jobs by 2031 will require some kind of post-secondary education. So it's pretty clear that we have an imperative as a state to be thinking about how do we make sure that more Arizonans have opportunity for post-secondary education. And so when I say post-secondary, what does that mean? It's kind of a wonky term, but what it means is any kind of education or training after high school that leads to some kind of certificate, a degree, an apprenticeship, or a licensure, right? It's that education you might get that would go above and beyond what you would get in high school. And the data is so clear in showing us that we need to make sure more of our students are prepared and ready to get that level of education and have those opportunities from the jump. And not only, as they graduate from high school, but also as they're in jobs and current employees. But all of this is why a number of years ago, about 60 partners came together and created this coalition to look at post-secondary education and what the state needed. And together they came up with a goal to help us rally around this idea of, how can we increase post-secondary education in the state and provide those opportunities. And that goal is called Achieve 60 AZ. Some of you might have heard of it, but what it does is say we want to get to 60% attainment by the year 2030. And when we set that goal, it's probably 2016 or so, and we thought, oh yeah, we have plenty of time to get there. But now we're 2024, so now we've got 6 more years to get to 2030. And where we stand today is that we're at 48% of Arizonans currently have some kind of certificate, license, or degree in our state. And so we know that we have a long road ahead and some good work to do for all of us. And the work to do isn't just, in policymakers or the higher ed community. It's really all of us working together to be thinking about how can we work together to create partnerships to provide that opportunity that Luke was talking about to all of our Arizonans, especially to our students and our underserved students, to make sure they have those kind of opportunities for post-secondary education.
Thank you, Erin. And as we think about educational attainment, I think a number of us have seen a lot of different data points. This one, to me, strikes me as particularly interesting in that it's looking at actual workers in the economy today, and what their educational attainment means to them in their current role. So it's I think very powerful from an attainment standpoint, and I think as we hear these conversations about is higher education worth it, the proof's in the pudding, I think. So thank you, Erin. And Richard, I want to start talking a little bit about the data tool and how it can be useful. I think we've all seen in all of our different roles a number of different tools that we've all engaged with, and I think just an obvious truth is tools are great, but unless they're used, it's not going to make a whole lot of impact. So Richard, from your seat as president of a community college, could you talk to us a little bit about how you and your team go about aligning your course offerings to industry demands, and how this particular tool might help enhance those efforts?
Sure. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Good to see all of you. One of the things I'd like to share is that Maricopa Community Colleges is the largest provider of workforce training in the state of Arizona. And with that, we're very cognizant. I have some colleague presidents here in the room and some workforce staff members also from the district office, cognizant about the fact that we have to take into account industry partners when we go about our work. We have to look at the demand that's out there, the needs. We heard from Luke about advanced manufacturing technicians. We know there's some semiconductor work being done, a little bit of work being done in Arizona here, particularly in Maricopa County. And all of a sudden, there's a tremendous need. So then we come together as institutions to figure out how do we help them meet those needs. The H3 jobs that were alluded to are very important. And as I began to look at this data, had a chance to be in the data a couple of different times and drill down and understand how do we think about the future of work, the future of the occupations, and the outlook of where we are moving as an industry. One of the things that's important when you look at the automation that's going to take over jobs today, and it's going to remove workers, that's a huge gap that we have to think about. Because one of the things that we have to be cognizant about in our institutions is that we can be training for workforce positions that will no longer be there. We can't train people for jobs that won't be there. That obsolescence is coming, so we have to be proactive on that end. Erin alluded to the fact of Georgetown's most recent report that talks about 72% by the year 2031 needing to have some post-secondary ed. Beyond that, they've also stated 42% of those jobs will require a bachelor's degree. And what we talk about in Maricopa Community Colleges is we look at how do we begin to stack a credential so it leads to a career. So you saw the pathways that Luke identified here. There's pathways where you begin, and you begin to see how you move forward in your career, and then the education needed to then continue on that. And then what happens is the income level increases. One of the things that we pride ourselves with is that we transform people's lives by providing education. I'm a first-generation college student from a mining town. We didn't do coal mining, we did copper mining in Superior. Paul's from Miami, They did copper mining there. So we understand the tools and the education required. There was an education back then that you needed. If you could work a pick and a shovel and you could put dynamite in an underground mine, you could figure this out. That's not how it's done today. Mining today is very complex. In terms of the workers they need and the workers they need to train is very different than we're talking about today. So as we think about these things, we have to be cognizant that all of us in this room are partners in thinking about the education workforce and where we're going. We have been an importer of talent here. I worked in a state and I worked in a city that was an exporter of talent. It changed its way, that's how it trained, how it brought business in, so then we could keep that talent there. If we want to homegrown our talent here, we have to invest in the talent. That's what we're not doing right now. One of the things that we're doing on our campuses, and particularly at South Mountain, is beginning to look at what exists around us, who our students are. I brought my team a year ago to the Decision Center to begin to look at the post-secondary education modules that are available to understand where the schools are and who they're serving. And that was a way for us to begin to identify pathways that we can begin to make a difference there. If you don't start in your communities, then you're not serving your community. And I think that's one of the key things. In our community, we are a Hispanic serving institution. 60% of our students are Latino students on our campus. So that's a population you saw as a major equity gap here. We also have African American students and Native American students. We're a minority serving institution. We have to address those equity issues. And I think as we think about that, it's critical that we begin to work with all of the industries to identify how do we move forward, and then we work with our faculty and staff to identify how we create those pathways, how we shift to what we're doing and move in the directions of where the jobs are. This is very clear data. I mean, every time I come and look at this data, I'm more amazed at when you drill down what you find. So I think this is going to be very important for all of us.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And Luke, again, thank you for the overview of the data tool itself. I want to go back to the pathways portion, and I think we have another slide here just again to give us reference, because it's a lot of data that you reviewed, and the tool is so nimble and it can do so many different things. I think one of the more powerful pieces of this visualization is this pathways portion, particularly the advancement options. So I know your time was limited in the presentation itself, but I do think this particular piece of the visualization merits a little bit more time. And so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the pathways portion of the visualization, the advancement option, what that means for the universities, for our community colleges, for businesses generally.
Thank you. And I'll do that. I'd like to do it in context of what Rich was just talking about the inequities in our system from the beginning, and then how that puts us in this situation. So look, this isn't that complex. Arizona's educational systems inequitably serve our Latino students, our Black students, our Native American students, our students in rural areas, our students with disabilities. It's really not that complex. If you look at the teachers in Arizona with emergency certifications, right? So the least preparation to be standing up in the classroom in front of our kids. 97% of those teachers teach in our Title I districts, our districts with the lowest income students. That's not complex, that's solvable, right? So from the very beginning, we have decided that some of our kids, don't deserve or don't need the great, well-prepared teacher in front of them that any of us would want for our own kids. That's unacceptable. It means that too many of our workers then are working in lower income sectors with lower starting salaries, higher exposure to automation risk, than needing these pathways. Right? Now, we're fortunate that right now, the bottom of our labor market is stronger than it has been in my entire lifetime. Right? It is only in the last few years that if you're walking into a frontline service job, you're expecting a starting salary of $15, $16, $17 an hour. As recently as 4 or 5 years ago, if you're working in a restaurant and your manager is harassing you, in the back of your mind is like, if I quit, like when am I going to be able to find something else, right? That is gone. The bottom of our economy, the bottom of our labor sector is as strong as it has ever been. The problem is that for too many workers, whose educational attainment then dropped during the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease in enrollment, a significant decrease in associate's degrees. They're now in a situation where they don't feel the need immediately to move up. And more importantly, they may not know what's available to them. You know, if you're working as a truck driver right now and your job is like 6, 7, 8 years away from being automated out of existence, do you know that there are jobs available as a logistics expert that you're already 80, 90% qualified for, but because those jobs are outside of your industry, outside of your sector, you can't even see them, right? That's, I think, the power of this tool, is that for an economic development official, for an executive who knows that their company is planning on obsolescence of a certain sector of their jobs, you know, the skills that those workers have are valuable skills. And so for a CEO, for someone running a city economic development program, for the community college president, the ability to look and say, who are the workers right now who are most at risk? And then what are the pathways up for them, and what can we build to help them advance, to help them see what they can't see from where they sit? That, I think, is maybe the most powerful part of this tool.
Thanks, Luke. And I want to press on this just a little bit, and I'll open it up to the panel. I think it makes perfect sense, very intuitive from, I think, a worker standpoint, what the pathways are. From a business standpoint, what the retraining might be needed to move someone upward into different positions. From an educational institution perspective, course syllabi are not designed to look at and to identify these types of skills. So how do we take that next step from an educational perspective? How do we identify these skills and translate them into meaningful offerings at our community colleges and our universities?
So look, I'm a professor of practice at ASU. I teach graduate students, and you know, a lot of our traditional academic programs are designed really around what professors think ought to be taught, right? These are the things that I learned. These are the things that I think are important. This is what I'm seeing from industry, because a lot of us keep, you know, in close touch with industry. But that's sort of the old way of designing academic programs. In a new effort that we've launched called the Learning Enterprise, what we're instead doing is looking at specific workforce needs right now, informed by what are the best jobs that are growing in demand. And then instead of offering full degree programs, offering career and upskilling opportunities directly tied to the skills required for those jobs. That's a whole new way of thinking. You know, community colleges have been doing that for a long time. But for a world-class university to be doing that too, and learning from that practice, I think is incredibly exciting.
Thanks, Luke. Richard?
I think just to add to Luke's point is that the fact that, so we take the opportunity to understand working with industry councils and industry partners to see where those needs are, and not to develop a full-scale degree program right off the bat, but to develop what's needed then, but then build upon that as a credential so that they move forward and they stack those credentials, so eventually they come out with a certificate, associates, move it into a bachelor's degree, and then beyond that, master's degrees as well. And I think that's the pipeline that we're talking about with the pathways here, is that you see growth throughout that. When you look at all those jobs, it's really exciting that we do have growth in Arizona, because that wasn't the case before. So when you think about the potential here now, we can grow our own talent as opposed to import all our own talent. You know, that's a predominantly opportunity that we have, but it's predicated on us taking that next step. We have to do this as institutions of higher ed, as partners, as business and industry. We have to come together and make this happen.
Thank you. And I want to take a second just to remind the audience, if you do have questions, please write them down, hold them up. Someone will come and get them from you. We're going to transition to questions in just a few minutes. Erin, so you've been a coalition builder working across sectors and communities to try and improve education outcomes for many, many years. What role do you see business leaders particularly playing to help ensure we have enough adults in Arizona with the training or education beyond high school needed to support our growing economy?
Well, you know, I think just building on some of what Luke and Richard were talking about, that we have this opportunity to sort of start thinking about this work differently. And I can tell you that in meetings that I'm able to be in, you know, fortunate to work for Governor Hobbs, but the biggest thing that I hear As we go talk with leaders and communities across the state, across all kinds of different industries, the biggest need is workforce, workforce, workforce. It is very clear across all sectors and across the state that there's this huge need that is developed. But what if instead of us thinking about like, well, we don't have the workforce we need, and why aren't they coming to us ready to go? To flip that on its head a little bit and start to think about what can we do to help prepare our own talent, to help grow that talent that we have here, both with our existing workforce and with new people coming in, to help create that talent that we all need. And there's a lot of businesses that do this already, but I think at scale, you could be talking about something that could really have a massive impact on supporting people as they're upskilling, reskilling, and earning those degrees and credentials to be able to build that talent pool that we all really need across the state. And we know when we do that, that strengthens their own lives. They have higher income, higher wages. It strengthens the community, it builds our workforce. There are benefits in it for everyone. And Helios and Education Forward have done some really great research about that, very specifically. But let me turn for a second to how do we think about this? How do we think about doing this work and building that pipeline of talent? And I want to share three quick things with you. One is that we can give opportunities for students when they're in high school to earn credentials, and even some can earn a degree, an associate's degree through dual enrollment while they're in high school. CTE, Career and Technical Education, provides a great opportunity, a great pathway to build skills and opportunities that can translate to certifications, degrees, and so forth in their future. The second is how do we help more students have that pathway to post-secondary education to make it more affordable, to give them options, and to be sure that underrepresented students have the opportunity to pursue some kind of post-secondary education. And then third, how do we look at our existing workforce? How do we help them skill, upskill, build their skills, and really train in a way that can help engage and support that workforce that we all need? And if I can, I want to kind of dig in here, because I think this is really the point of your question, Vince, is that there's so many creative ideas that the business community can be partners and really innovate in thinking about how can we structure our business to be able to help also think about workforce. And those lines between, is it education or is it work and career? Those lines I think in the past felt very distinct, right? Very separate. But now they're really blended together, that it's not education or work, it's not one path or another. These are pathways that are very much blended, very much aligned, and they should be, right? But I think even more so now, there's opportunity for business to lean in and for business leaders to think about how can we offer opportunity for young people and for our current workforce to be able to have those skills. And so some concrete ideas, some concrete things that could be looked into. For high school students, think about career exploration and how can you help share what you do with the students in your community by offering internships or other opportunities for on-job shadowing, or for folks to come in and just share what they do in a school setting about your career and what you do. Career exploration is a huge need across the state. In some places it's done better than others, but it still is a huge opportunity for students to be able to think through, oh yeah, that job is really cool, or I want to check that out someday. And it also helps change some of their thinking too, because I think, when we think about advanced manufacturing jobs, often there's a notion of something that's old and kind of not the most ideal job situation, but really, when you start exposing kids to what it is today and what these jobs look like today in a clean room or at semiconductor or other opportunities, they're really cool. They're very cool and engaging and hands-on. So that's one thing. But another, can employers start to think about how do we create the structures within your businesses that allow employees to take advantage of those opportunities to learn? Can you partner with a community college in your community to design a pathway? Can you offer an apprenticeship program that gives on-the-job training that leads to a credential or a degree that's very specific to the work that you do? Or maybe it's even something more simple, could you take a look at your HR policies and make sure that if employees need flexibility with their schedules, that you can offer them just flexibility when they work, so that maybe if they need a little bit of time on Tuesday to get to a class, that they have the opportunity to do that. or if your resources allow to provide a scholarship or tuition assistance in some form. So there's a whole spectrum of things that businesses can do, and I think now's the time for all of us to think about creatively, how can we work together? How can we all play a role in supporting Arizonans and earning those credentials or degrees, and thinking about what those best fits might be for you, for your industry, and for the people that you work with every day. But it's an all hands on deck moment. It's a moment where we can all come together and all have a role to play.
Thanks, Erin. One of the things you touched on early was the role that CTE could play. Luke, as you were going through the module, there's so much there that we really couldn't, but could you talk just really briefly to the educational outcomes with respect to CTE that we've highlighted in the tool itself?
Yeah, we didn't get to everything. There's more in there. But I agree wholeheartedly with Erin. We should be doing everything we possibly can to get as many students to promote college going, get as many students into college as possible. Dual enrollment, which she mentioned, significantly increases the odds that a student will go on to college and that they will actually do better in college. So dual enrollment is a key. CTE, there's a sort of an idea out there that CTE is somehow tracking kids, saying, college isn't for you. Our data shows, and we didn't get to that screen, that students who are CTE concentrators, which is to say they take 2 or more courses in the same field, are actually the most likely students to graduate high school and to go to university. Those who take at least one CTE course are much more likely than students who don't take any to go on to college. So yeah, it's a huge opportunity, I think, for us to increase college going.
Thank you, Luke. And Richard, as we think about the attainment goal, I think a lot of times we, me included, tend to think of it in terms of the traditional education pipeline, that pipeline of students coming straight out of high school and into some form of post-secondary education. We know, because of a lot of your work, some of the work of Education Forward Arizona, that maybe the biggest piece of reaching the attainment goal is re-engaging adult learners. And I know the community college systems are central to that effort. Can you talk a little bit about what re-engaging adult learners means, what strategies we might employ, and how the visualization, the tool, the data can help sort of light a path?
Sure. Let me just kind of go back to the dual enrollment and CTE. So I think one of the things I just want to emphasize that through all the community colleges in Maricopa, we do a lot of work in dual enrollment across the entire county. So there are colleagues in this room that do that work really well in each of our colleges. So I want to make sure that we provide the access. The challenge is that providing the access to some of our students. So the students that we're talking about where the equity gaps exist, that's where the students are not getting access to dual enrollment. And those are the challenges that we have. So I think as we think about it, we need to somehow level that playing field so that everybody has access. I really want to go back to Chairman Roig's point when he talked about they focus on all kids and all students. And I think that's the key that we need to talk about is how do we focus on everyone having success? We can't have winners and losers. We have to have winners for everyone. And that's the role that I think is so important in this is that we have to think about that. So when we talk about the adult population, we have 1 million people in Arizona that have some college, no degree. If we look at the attainment goal, if we were to translate all of those people to high-level certificates, to associate's, bachelor's degrees, we will meet our attainment goal. The challenge becomes, how do we begin to work through that process across all the systems that we have? One of the things that we're trying to do proactively on our campus at South Mountain Community College, and the district is also the 9 other colleges are also focused on this, is how do we begin to identify those people working with industry, working with business, identifying opportunities to say, how can we help your current employees? Where are they today? Are some of your jobs possibly looking at maybe being automated and obviously not being available in the future? How do we begin to focus on all of those areas? And as we think about these things, it begins to build partnerships and relationships. All of you here today are here because you have a relationship with many people in this room. That's how things happen. Things happen because of relationships, and we have to make that work. One of the key things that we're also beginning to do is identify how do we share information. The stuff that we have seen today, these slides and this opportunity in terms of the visualization, will be a tool that will enable us to be able to share this with others. Be able to sit down with large groups and say, this is where you are today, this is what's happening in your industry. If you want to think about the future, these are the jobs and the growth areas, and this is the pathway. But it's going to take us sitting down with people doing that. It's not just, you put it out there and it's a flyer, it's a billboard. It's going to take time and effort. A lot of the work that I used to do at Education Forward Arizona when I was on this campus before is actually getting out in communities and having our success coaches navigate that work for students, helping them understand the big picture, working with companies, working with educational partners all across the state. Those are the things that we do, is that we get in front of people, we work that information and we provide it, and we help them understand that. That's what it's going to take to get there. Is it's going to take a lot of hand holding. It's hard to hold a million hands, but I think if we do it collectively, we can be successful doing a lot of different ways of making that happen. But it has to be what I talk a lot about on our campus. It has to be intentionality. If you don't lead with intentionality, you're not going to get the results that you need and be successful. And I think that's how we come together and be intentional in those aspects.
Thanks, Richard. And we're just about time for at least this portion of the panel. We're going to transition to audience questions here in just a second. Luke, I want to close out with one last question for you. So in a perfect world, how would a policymaker, school administrator, or economic developer use the information in the visualization to ensure that Arizona is relying less on importing talent and instead building the talent pipeline from within?
Well, look, first I'd return to what we were just talking about with Erin, which is doing everything we can to improve college going. Dual enrollment, CTE, whatever it takes, we've got to improve college going. Clearly, we need more effort on closing the equity gaps. We act like it's this really difficult, complex question. Why is it the case that performance is lower? Well, performance is lower because we put less qualified teachers in those rooms, and we paid them less. We've accepted it. We've been okay with it at some level. We cannot be okay with it. I think that's one thing. Another thing, just using this data to build the pathways. I think Richard just talked about how you can do that, but it really is, as you said, person to person. It is personal. It is not antiseptic. You don't just put it out and hope that it works. You actually have to work with the people who are going to do those jobs, work with the people who are going to build those courses, person to person. I guess the last thing I would say, I understand this is an education and workforce conversation, but this is all interconnected. We're kidding ourselves if we don't think it is. If I was a state policymaker, I'd be terrified by how clear it is that we've been having to import talent, given what's going on in our housing market. We have to build more housing. We are 270,000 homes behind in Maricopa County. We're short 270,000 homes. Kids are graduating from ASU asking, can I afford to live here? We have over 100,000 students at ASU. We are creating a massive pool of talent for Arizona, and then they can't afford to live here. They go somewhere else. That is insane. We should be building much more housing to reduce the pressure on what we're seeing up here.
Thank you, Luke. We're going to transition to some questions that we received from the audience. I'm going to try to get through as many as we can, and things are about to get very interesting, so buckle up. So I will open this up to just any member of the panel. And the question is, K-12 teachers are integral to student success and encouraging educational attainment. What is the plan for ensuring a world-class K-12 education system in support of these goals? What is the goal for creating a pipeline for committed, qualified teachers, especially STEM teachers? Who's the brave one?
I was going to defer to you, but I'm happy to give my ideas.
Yeah, I can start. And I have a guess who this question may have come from, but no, I think this is a really important question. And as Luke mentioned, this is really at the crux of everything, right? This is the foundation of what we're talking about, because the experience that students have in the classroom with their teachers really provides that foundation from which they grow. And in my opinion, supporting and making sure that our teachers feel supported and are well paid are certainly priorities of the governor, and are big priorities for us as a state. If we get that right, we get a whole lot of other things right. And last year, I happened to have the opportunity to work with the Governor's Educator Retention Task Force, and we studied the issue with educators from across the state. We looked at how can we better support, how can we better retain and make sure that working conditions are better for teachers across the state, and that includes STEM teachers, right? All teachers. And so we came up with a set of things that we're doing, and there's a number of them that we are working to implement. But this is really, again, this is not just about what we can do with policy, but this is also what can we do from a community standpoint with partners, with nonprofits, with our higher ed institutions, with school districts to say, how can we work together to make sure that we can find solutions. But, we're working actively on Prop 123, which would help, with pay and addressing pay. So I'm sure you've heard some of that in the media. And there's a number of other things that we're working on as well, but could use all of your support in thinking about, how can we better support teachers and providing working conditions. And just like with education and post-secondary education, with K-12 and supporting teachers, there's a role for everyone to play. Even if you're just a parent and you're saying thank you, that goes a huge long way as we think about how do we improve the culture of how much we value teachers in the state. So there's a role. We could certainly talk for a really long time about this topic, but know that it is top of mind for us and is a priority for the governor as we do our work every day.
And we definitely appreciate the governor's role in championing the importance of teachers. Not an Arizona issue, it is a national issue, so I definitely appreciate your work, Erin, as well. Luke seems like he wants to get in here.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah.
so I'm just going to be real honest. I think for the last many decades, we've had a general policy approach of investing to attract retirees and high-income residents, investing to attract businesses, and skating by with as little for our kids as we can get by with. That's the approach we've taken. And so then we're like somehow surprised at the results. I'm heartened by the current commitment at the state level to go in a different direction. I think that's incredibly exciting. And it's rough sledding too. I mean, let's be honest, that's rough sledding to say we've been doing it this way for a few decades, people are used to it, and now we're saying like, no, we're gonna invest in our kids, we're gonna invest in our teachers. The other thing I'll say to move away from the polemic and a little bit more to the data, we looked at the states with the highest economic mobility in the entire country, which is to say kids growing up at the 25th percentile there, how high do they rise? Of the top 10 states with the highest economic, we're 37th, by the way. Of the top 10 states with the highest economic mobility in the country, 7 of those 10 were also in the top 10 for the most experienced teachers in their schools, teachers who had been in the classroom the longest. So everything we can do to retain our current great teachers, keep them in the classroom because that talent and that knowledge only grows over time, that is directly tied to economic mobility for your kids later on. And so other states have been very successful in that. I think we can too, and I'm excited about the direction we're going.
Thank you, Luke. I love this next question. Across the nation, perception of higher education seems to be worsening to some degree. From your perspectives, how can we as educators begin to communicate the value of higher ed, especially to communities that feel betrayed? Richard.
I think one of the things that I was going to make reference to earlier is the value proposition of higher education has continued to decline because I think we haven't been able to share all of the successes that come with that in terms of preparing people to be successful. You look on the screen and you see those that actually have the most success have had the education beyond that. But I think we also have to build that pipeline early when we talk about getting into schools, when Erin was talking about making sure that we understand what's happening from all grades, is that we talk about how we develop this because it should be ingrained that opportunities are there when you have more education beyond high school. And I think if you look at the data that we just talked about in terms of what's out there with the required jobs, if 72% by 2031 require a post-secondary education and 42% require a bachelor's or higher, that's significant. We have to be giving that message today so that people don't think that if you can graduate from high school, go make $20 an hour at one of the local restaurants and what have you, that's not sustainable. You know, you just talked about 270,000 houses that we need. You know, you can't buy a house, you know, making $20 an hour. You can't sustain yourself into the future. I think those are the things that are important, is that we got to talk about the value proposition of what higher education has done for those that we serve. And then we have to serve those that we're serving in the best way. And the equity discussion has to be in there, because if we're not doing that, then we're not doing what we have said that we're committed to doing, and showing that students have opportunity. And then we see that, and then it's transformational. It's just not them, it's actually their families that you transform the lives. And then it's their families, their other families and friends, and it's a generational shift that we'll begin to see. We haven't seen that enough across this state. We've seen it in multiple areas, but not enough that we can actually get some cadence there that we need.
Just two quick things I'd add on. I mean, it's really interesting. At a time where the premium for having a degree, the increase in pay for having a degree has only grown, is only growing right now, growing even faster for master's degrees than bachelor's degrees. How is it that then there are these negative attitudes about higher education? And I think it's pretty simple. It's the arrogance of the higher education institutions who have built themselves around themselves, faculty and leadership who think that like they're the point. No, the students are the point. One of the things I'm really proud of Dr. Crow, of Michael, my boss, one of the things I'm really proud of him for is that he has done everything he can to design our institution to serve the students that we serve. Like that is, I mean, when you have colleges out there bragging about only accepting 1 out of every 20 applicants, we should be looking to serve as many students as we possibly can and help them advance. That should be the purpose. And I think if every higher education institution adopted that purpose, you wouldn't be seeing those negative attitudes, because the premium on what you get with a degree is only growing.
Tate.
Yeah, and moderator, I'm taking a privilege here, just to a specific, a point of the question, which is how can we as educators begin to communicate the value of higher ed? One of the features really that is the visualization provides is the ability to look at particular occupations, what their educational requirements are, and what a career looks like from an earning standpoint. And so if I'm a school counselor, I think there can be nothing more powerful than really laying out what career paths look like, not from a theoretical standpoint, but from what the data actually say is happening in Arizona today. It's incredibly powerful. We've had a few individuals look at the tool through, I think, really an educator perspective, a K-12 educator perspective, and I think that's been a consistent takeaway. Next question, this is also an important one, and Luke, this is really for you. How will this data be updated over time? What are the frequency and sources?
So the sources are innumerable, and whoever asked the question, please find me afterwards. I'm happy to share the data documentation with you. Gavin, Christy, and the rest of the team have done an amazing job pulling all that together. It is constantly updated. Christy's done an incredible job. Every month or so, we've got new data coming in from our private data providers. Every year or so, the administrative data or the government data is updated, but they're all updated at different times. So it's thanks in part. It is thanks to the partnership with Helios that we have the resources that we need to have such incredible team members with the skills to do that constantly. If we didn't have that, this would become obsolete in just a couple years.
Thank you, Luke. I think we have time for one more question. One more question. And this is, I think, in the same line around making the case for post-secondary attainment. What should we start doing in K-12 to start driving students to post-secondary opportunities?
So I'll just jump in. Preview. The next visualization coming from the ASU Helios Decision Center for Educational Excellence. So we talked about we're roughly on par through 8th grade, then we're beginning to fall off significantly through high school. We are currently building a tool. Can I give a tiny preview? Are we good with that? We're currently building a tool that will help every single principal, every single superintendent across the entire state who shares their data with us will be able to see exactly where, from 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, exactly where their students fell off the college-going pathway, which students, which subgroups. You can go down to race and ethnicity, free and reduced lunch, gender, any subgroup, so that our hypothesis is students fall off the college-going pathway for all sorts of different reasons in different towns, different reasons at different schools. For a principal or superintendent to be able to see precisely which courses their students failed to enroll in junior year or senior year that knocked them off the college-going pathway, and then working directly with those subgroups of students to make sure they're enrolled, I think that'll be enormously powerful. I couldn't be more excited that this is coming this year.
Well,
Thank you, Luke. That's a great way, I think, to sort of end the panel discussion. There's tremendous work being done by Joe O'Reilly, Dr. Joe O'Reilly, the team from the Decision Center. There's a lot more to come. One quick last point, Richard, and then I got to transition out.
Sure. I just want to make reference to the fact that we can't let the fact that Helios had the foresight through the leadership of Paul and Vince to develop this Helios ASU Educational Excellence Decision Center, because the data, having been on this campus before as a partner at Forward, I guess I took for granted the access I had to this data, but now being on the other side, I see the value, and I saw the value then, but the value that you continue to bring to this state that's not accessible at other places. I've been in other states, and we don't have access to this kind of data, this kind of research, this kind of work, the team at ASU that Luke leads to make it happen. So we can't understate the fact that this is a huge investment that Helios has put forward to make this happen. And it's happening for our community partners, institutions of higher ed, to take advantage of. So if you don't take advantage of coming and using that tool, getting the credential, then I think we've lost what we're trying to accomplish, is move this forward. So I really want to appreciate your leadership, Paul and Vince, for what you've done to do this. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And please help me thank the panel. Amazing discussion. Really appreciate you taking the time.